The sun hung lazily over the sleepy town as Esther's parents dropped her off at Highlights Secondary School, a prestigious institution surrounded by tall iron gates and thick, whispering trees. Esther, a bright JSS 3 student with curious eyes and a shy smile, waved goodbye, unaware of the hidden darkness that festered behind the school's grand facade. As the security gates closed behind her, she felt an odd chill run down her spine, even though the air was humid. Matron lady, a stern-faced woman with eyes too sharp to trust, handed her a dorm key and directed her toward Block C, which all students quietly referred to as Cursed Block. On her way, Esther met Chica and Farida, two girls who immediately took a liking to her. They whispered jokes about teachers, but warned her never to speak out loud after midnight. Esther laughed it off. Boarding school rules always seemed weird to new students. That night, as the lights flickered in the hallway and the power cut out, Esther thought she heard humming in the dark, a slow, sorrowful lullaby. "That's the corridor singer," Chica whispered. "Ignore it. Don't hum back." Esther laughed again, nervously, but her heart pounded as the melody continued long into the night. She dreamt of someone scratching at her window, whispering her name in a language she didn't understand. Highlight School was strict. No phones, no going out after prep, no whistling, no looking into the cracked mirror in the old assembly hall. But the students had their own rules too, rules whispered behind bunk beds and in the dining hall queue. Never eat the jollof on Fridays. "It's not food, it's a silence ritual," Chica muttered, poking at her plate with a fork. "Don't ever open dorm room, even if you hear someone crying inside. Especially if you hear someone crying inside," Farida warned. Esther listened and obeyed. Mostly. But curiosity is a demon all on its own. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered toward the abandoned library. No one had used it since the fire 5 years ago. There, she found dusty books, scorch marks on the walls, and a diary that didn't burn. The cover read, "Property of Femi Adebayo, Class of 2018. Do not read past page 33." Of course, she read past page 33. The pages revealed drawings of students with mouths sewn shut, of classrooms soaked in blood, of Principal O'Dave with black eyes and horns behind his head. "They feed on fear," one page read. "That's how they stay young." Esther shoved the diary into her bag and ran back to the dorm. She didn't notice the figure watching her from the ceiling. The next day, Femi Adebayo's name reappeared on the student registry list, 5 years after he vanished. Chica's bunkmate Temi began sleepwalking and whispering to empty corners. Matron lady confiscated the diary and told Esther, "Some stories are not for your generation." That night, Temi's bed was found soaked in blood, but she had no wounds. Farida swore she saw shadows dragging something into the walls. The next morning, Temi was gone. The school announced she had transferred, but her mattress was still wet with blood. A new teacher arrived, Miss Nkuru, young and soft-spoken, with skin so pale it looked powdered. The boys swooned, but the girls knew something was off. Her shadow often moved a second too late. In class, she spoke perfect Latin without any prior teaching. One evening, Esther walked past the staff room and saw Miss Nkuru floating inches above the ground, speaking to a locked drawer. Chica dared her to open dorm room 13. "Let's end the mystery," she said. They waited till lights out and crept down the hall. The door opened by itself. Inside was a bed with iron cuffs and mirrors covering every wall. A girl sat in the center, chained. Her eyes were white. Her mouth was stitched. "And yet," she whispered, "run." The door slammed shut behind them. The mirrors shimmered and reflected not themselves, but twisted versions, burned faces, missing limbs, bleeding eyes. Esther screamed, but no one heard. The room muffled sound. The chained girl stood up. Her chains fell off on their own. She opened the book, the girl rasped. "So now they come." With strength that defied physics, the girl flung open the window and disappeared into the night mist. The door opened. No one said a word. They never spoke of room 13 again. Days later, students started vanishing. First it was Whale from SS1. Then it was Bola from JSS2. Each time, the school claimed they had transferred, but their belongings remained. Esther saw black veins creeping across her own hands in the morning. Chica began drawing symbols in her sleep. Farida developed an intense phobia of mirrors. She screamed and convulsed when one was brought near her. The school nurse dismissed them as boarding stress. Then Esther found Femi Adebayo's name etched into the back of her closet door. "You're next," it said beneath it. That night, the fire alarm went off, but there was no fire, only smoke, and shadows that moved against the walls like living ink. Esther started seeing eyes blinking in the ceiling vents. The head girl, Nkechi, called an emergency dorm meeting, but she was possessed halfway through and vomited black sludge. Chika began reciting Bible verses backwards in her sleep. Esther returned to the library in daylight, desperate for answers. She found another diary, this one bound in leather and locked. The librarian, blind and mute, handed her the key without a word. Inside were rituals, maps, instructions, and a single phrase repeated 17 times. "Esther is the beacon." She showed it to Farida and Chika, but the words vanished when they looked. Only Esther could read the book. It responded to her. The next full moon, she was guided by the book to the rooftop of the old chapel. There, she saw Principal Odafe feeding something dark into the sky, a twisting cloud of mouths and eyes. Miss Nkiru was beside him, her arms glowing with ancient runes. "The beacon has awakened," Odafe hissed. Esther fled, but the school changed. Walls rearranged. Doors vanished. Time folded. She relived the same day 3 times, and on the third repeat, she found herself face to face with Femi Adebayo. He hadn't aged. He hadn't blinked. "We tried to stop them. We failed. But you might still win," he said. He gave her a ritual dagger carved from chalk and bone. The next night, the school feigned normalcy. In Turhouse, sports resumed. But students were bleeding from their eyes and still cheering. Esther, armed with the dagger and the diary, descended into the basement no one knew existed. There, she saw the truth. Highlights was a feeding ground for demonic entities called the Yuzuru. Every 10 years, the school offered 50 souls in exchange for prestige and perfect WAC results. The staff were priests in disguise. The students were chosen from bloodlines cursed generations ago. Esther's mother had attended the school and escaped. That's why they brought Esther back, to complete the offering. But Esther wasn't a sacrifice. She was a key. She called the Yuzuru by name, and they listened. "You want blood?" she whispered. "Take the guilty." The walls screamed. The floors cracked. Teachers clawed at their own eyes. The Yuzuru took Principal Odafe first. His body imploded in a burst of flame and bone. Miss Nkiru fled toward the tower, but Esther followed her. "You're a child," Nkiru hissed, sprouting wings of flame. "You don't know what you've done." "I broke the chain," Esther replied. "I'm not alone anymore." The spirits of the lost students rose from cracks in the floor, Femi among them. They formed a circle around Nkiru, binding her in ancient light. Chika and Farida performed the cleansing ritual from the diary. Nkiru screamed as her skin cracked and her demon form spilled out. The sky turned black. Rain fell upward. The Yuzuru demanded a new pact, but Esther refused. "No more children," she said. "No more lies." She drove the chalk and bone dagger into the old headmaster's seal. The entire school shook violently. A portal opened and sucked in everything tied to the curse: books, bones, and Nkiru herself. When the dust settled, the school was quiet. Students woke up with no memory of the horrors. Only Esther, Chika, and Farida remembered. Femi's spirit nodded once and vanished into the light. Principal Odafe's office collapsed into rubble. Matron Lady was never seen again. The school's name changed overnight to Hopefield Academy, but no one explained why. The media called it electrical malfunction, but they couldn't explain the black fog caught on camera. Esther's parents pulled her out, but before leaving, she buried the diary in the woods behind the chapel. "Let no one open this again," she whispered. But as the term resumed, a new student arrived. He found a book buried in the woods. It whispered to him too. The corridor singer returned. Mirrors started cracking again, and in the staff room, a new teacher introduced herself. "Miss Oyanade." She smiled. Her shadow moved twice. Esther woke in a dream. She was back in dorm room 13. The chained girl stared at her again, but this time she smiled. "You delayed it, but it always returns." Esther begged to know how to stop it forever. "You can't. You can only pass the torch." Chika became a priestess. Farida never returned to school, but Esther chose a different path. She became a teacher at another school. where the lights sometimes flicker, and a student once hummed a familiar lullaby. She watches carefully. Always. The Yuzuru are patient. They wait 10 years. Or 20. Or 30. They whisper through textbooks. They feed through fear. In every generation, a beacon is born. To fight. Or to fall. Highlights may have fallen, but its curse was never truly buried. Somewhere in a dusty boarding school, a cracked mirror waits. Somewhere, an assembly bell rings thrice at midnight. Somewhere, a book opens itself to the next child who is curious enough. Esther prays they are strong, but in her heart, she knows the demons in